We're glad to have you with us on Business Incorporated. Thank you for joining us. I am BC Adebayo. On today's program, Moody's changes Ghana's outlook to positive from stable. And Egypt signs 2 deals with ExxonMobil for oil and gas exploration in the Mediterranean. Plus, Kenya's Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee cuts benchmark lending rate to 8.25%. Well, we get to the markets right away, and it's looking like another day of losses at the major markets we track in Africa. Now, here in Nigeria, the Osho Index declined 0.41% at about midday, while the GSA Index in South Africa also fell 0.36%. The EGX 30 also declined 0.48% at intraday, and in Nairobi, the stock market also closed negative on Monday. We'll return to the Middle East now, where the Abu Dhabi index rose 0.21% at intraday as First Abu Dhabi Bank advanced 0.8% after posting a 5% increase in fourth quarter profits. Dubai's index edged up 0.13% after 4 days of declines, with the Dubai Islamic Bank gaining 0.4%. Saudi Arabia's index was up 0.05% after 5 sessions of losses, while Qatar's index fell 0.63% at intraday. Crossover now to Europe, where the stocks traded slightly higher today as investors monitor developments relating to the China's coronavirus after global markets plummeted on Monday. Chelsea Delaney is reporting from the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Chelsea, tell us, are we just seeing a temporary stabilization at the market, or do investors see less cause for concern?
Most of the investors I speak to really are seeing this as a temporary stabilization. The stock markets across Europe have been, and really across the world, have been hit really hard since Friday, and it makes sense for investors to take a little breather here. But they say that the risks remain quite high, as do the uncertainties surrounding this virus. The big question for investors and for the global economy is how contagious is this virus? How quickly is it going to spread? And how able is China to shut down the spread of this virus? And all of those questions remain unanswered for investors. And I think it's going to take a while for the public health community, for governments to really understand how deadly and how contagious this virus is. And that's going to keep investors on edge here as they try and suss out what the impact on the global economy is going to be, what the impact on companies, on travel, on consumer spending, on all of these different variables. Those are going to remain big questions in the coming weeks.
While we await answers to those questions, possibly, analysts are also warning that the coronavirus could disrupt the supply chains of multinationals like Apple, as several manufacturing hubs in China remain under quarantine. Could this lead to an iPhone shortage?
I think that's one of the concerns here, is how this is going to really impact the supply chains, because China is obviously a very big manufacturing center, but it's also a very big supplier of consumer electronics, of technology, and all of the intermediary parts that go into that technology. So Apple has been really picked out as the prime example of this trend towards these long supply chains. So Apple it relies on a lot of suppliers in China, and a lot of those are going to be exposed to the virus-related shutdowns and quarantines. One of Apple's main suppliers, where it gets about 25% of its iPhones, is located in China, Foxconn, and they have not yet been quarantined where that factory is, but the chief executive of that company is warning that they may not allow workers to come back to work after the Lunar New Year. So there's definitely a potential that this will impact Apple's supply chain, and this really comes at a delicate time for Apple, because they have made a lot of promises, and they've made a lot of goals to really be ramping up iPhone production over the next couple of months. They have a launch scheduled for March March, and they had really been planning on ramping up production in China in the next couple of weeks, and now all of those plans are really uncertain. Apple is slated to report earnings later today, and so I think we'll possibly be getting some comments from the company then about how they really expect this to impact their iPhone production and sales over the next couple of months.
Fingers crossed there. Well, now in other news now, the head of Germany's main industry association, BDI, warned on Tuesday that the UK's long-awaited departure from the EU on Friday could still turn into a disorderly exit now that would upend trade and business. What are the concerns for European companies?
The concerns have really turned over the past several months from a disorderly Brexit to sort of what's going to happen in the next 11 months. So once the UK exits the European Union, they have 11 months to hammer out a new trade agreement with the EU. Investors haven't really been paying much attention to this. It's kind of fallen into the background over the past couple of months since the UK has become closer to Brexit. But what BDI, what the head of this trade organization is saying is that it's going to be extremely difficult for the UK and the EU to reach a trade deal in the next 11 months. There's a lot of really big, thorny issues to hash out. And it seems extremely unlikely that they're going to actually be able to come to an agreement within 11 months, because it also, whatever agreement they reach, is going to have to be approved by the parliaments and the governing bodies of all of the EU member states. So what this organization BDI is saying is that it's very unlikely that they'll be able to get all of that together in the next 11 months, and so there still is a chance that the UK leaves this transition period without an agreement, and that would, of course, create a lot of problems for both the UK and for all of the businesses here in Germany and Europe that rely on trade with the UK. So I think this hasn't been a big concern for investors over the past couple of weeks, but I think it could definitely return to the forefront once the UK and the EU begin negotiating for this during this transition period in the next couple of months.
Many thanks, Chelsea. We'll see you again on the program tomorrow.